All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy noontime. I'm Jen Walling. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Environmental Council, and I am really excited to start off our town hall series about our different issue areas. We have 6 of them coming up. This is the first time that we have ever done this, and we just have heard from our board and from our affiliate and individual members the need to really take feedback in developing our legislative agenda for the year. Of course, this year, our legislative agenda didn't move forward at all because of the pandemic. They didn't consider any legislation really other than the budget. So we weren't able to move it forward, but we want to look at some of those bills from last year and move forward. So, this is our first one. It's going to, be some trial and error. We're going to learn, but we have about half an hour presentation scheduled where we're going to do some background and level setting from some of the affiliate members that we work with the most on these issues. They're going to share some things that they're moving forward. And then we are going to take public comment, and Elliot will describe that. And public comment, we will have some poll questions he'll talk about. You should feel free to enter anything in the chat box at any time. We do have some people signed up, so we'll let you speak. You can also add yourself by typing it in the chat box. But we hope everybody will stay on mute otherwise, and we're going to try to call on everybody in a really orderly manner. And I'm going to kick it off. Elliot is our Ag and Water Programs Director. He is just really excellent in knowing the process, knowing how to do these things. And so I'm really excited to kick it off to him. But because we're doing food systems today, I want to give you a little bit of my favorite new analogy about what IEC is, because a lot of you may be new to IEC or come to this through your own organization. We were formed in 1975 by other environmental organizations, and we were formed explicitly with the purpose of representing the environmental community, making sure we had one voice that couldn't be divided. I often describe what we do as opening doors, so making sure we have really solid relationships with decision makers, that we can open doors when people have a problem. And it is, to me, what we do is about solving problems. There's a lot of you that are practitioners, that are farmers, that are people who are doing what I call the real work, and we're just writing words. But you guys identify the problems that are out there, you tell us about them, and then we can help try to remove them to make sure what you're moving forward is better. But to get to that analogy, I had a really great radio interview with Nancy Clem, who does a lot of work on composting, and I love her. And I have been thinking a lot about how our role in this movement is building the soil. Our role is making sure that state decision makers are educated, they're primed, they're ready to go, and they're going to act the right way for the environment. So we're making sure that the growing material that's out there is the best possible, has all of the right microorganisms, all of the right amendments to it, and you guys are giving us the seeds and helping things grow. So I know that's a really corny analogy to give you, but I think a great one for food system. And I really appreciate the role that we have in building the soil so that all of you and your ideas and policy can move forward and grow. So I will pitch that off then to Elliot Clay, who is our Ag and Water Programs Director, who's going to go through the agenda for today.
Cool. Thank you, Jen, so much. Just to reiterate, thank you all for joining us. This is going to be really important and helpful for us and kind of forming, like a lot of really important policy decisions that happen next year. And even though, as she was saying, like our policy agenda was kind of goofy this year because of COVID, we're going to be carrying some stuff over from this year into next year, but also recognizing the fact that there's some stuff that we might be missing or things that we should be focused on more. And we really value everybody's input on that. And I'm excited to kind of get feedback from everybody. So just as a brief overview of how this is going to go, we're going to do some brief 5-minute a person presentations from, as Jen said, some of our affiliates to talk about kind of the state of agriculture in Illinois right now from a few different perspectives, from rural ag to urban ag to kind of the food system and kind of everything in between. So with that, I think we were going to start generally with just rural agriculture in Illinois. Obviously, as everybody knows, if you drive from Chicago or down to Springfield or vice versa, or basically anywhere, you're going to see a lot of corn and soy and all that fun stuff. So ag is obviously a big part of Illinois' economy and just our way of living and stuff. With that, I am going to hand it off to Chris Reynolds, who works for American Farmland Trust, and they've done a lot of great work in the state, primarily around what I guess we would call like rural agriculture and stuff. So with that, Chris, I will kick it off to you and let you do your thing.
All right, thanks, Elliot, and good afternoon, everyone. American Farmland Trust is a national nonprofit organization with a mission to save the land that sustains us by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and also keeping farmers on the land. Elliot's given me 5 minutes to kind of talk about the landscape and the current challenges and conditions of rural agriculture in Illinois, and so hope to take that time to talk about kind of those 3 areas that I mentioned that are part of our mission. AFT recently released the Farms Under Threat State of the States Research Report. The report and the interactive website can be found at farmland.org. Farms Under Threat is the most comprehensive assessment ever undertaken of the use of U.S. ag land resources and the threats to agricultural land from development. And from 2001 to 2016, over 11 million acres of land were paved over, fragmented, or converted to other land uses that compromise agriculture. Through the state policy scorecards, the report identifies areas where individual states have made progress in protecting land and where more progress is certainly needed. From 2001 to 2016, Illinois lost about 240,000 acres of farmland, and 177,000 acres of this land is considered nationally significant land, which is some of the best land or the best soil in the country for long-term production of food and other crops. With 27 million acres of agriculture land on 73,000 farms, Illinois scored in the middle of all states for the conversion of ag land to urban and highly developed and low density residential uses. Illinois scored among the lowest states for policies and programs that address the threat. Agricultural lands are essential to a more resilient America that is better prepared for crisis, and we need to do more to protect those lands, specifically in Illinois. Just as alarming is the fact that there are about 4 times as many farmers over the age of 65 as what are under the age of 35. This stands in stark contrast to the general workforce, where there are more than 6 times as many people under the age of 35 that are employed as those over the age of 65. Non-operating landowners and farmers age 65 and over own more than 40% of the ag land in the United States. This suggests that there will be an impending transfer of more than 371 million acres nationwide in the United States, and states can do more to help support farm transfer and land access to young, beginning, and disadvantaged farmers. More widespread use of a FarmLink program and providing beginning farmer tax credits can help connect new farmers to agricultural lands. In recent years, farmers have dealt with trade wars, climate change, low commodity prices, and now the pandemic. All of these have had an impact on farm profitability and mental health. Corn and soybeans, as Elliot mentioned, really make up the majority of crops that are being grown in Illinois. And farmers are continuing to increase yields through technology and with the adoption of best management practices, all while using less fertilizers to produce the same amount of crops. From 1980 to 2010, farmers actually increased corn production by 87% and reduced fertilizer use by about 4%. So why is Illinois number 1 in the contributor of nutrients that leave the state of Illinois, flow down the Mississippi River, and eventually enter the Gulf of Mexico? Illinois' lack of crop diversity, also the percentage of tile-drained acres that are present in Illinois, and the increased amount of runoff from climate change and infield management practices has helped gain Illinois this number 1 spot. In 2015, Illinois released the Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. This strategy identifies voluntary conservation practices that farmers can adopt to decrease nutrient losses. Practice adoption has increased, but definitely not at the rate and scale that's going to be needed to meet the goals. This past year, AFT led the efforts of several partner organizations, along with the Illinois Department of Ag, to develop the Fall Covers for Spring Savings pilot program. The program provides a $5 per acre crop insurance premium discount to farmers that are utilizing cover crops ahead of their commodity practices. this program couples a conservation cropping practice like cover crops with the farmer's trusted risk management safety net program. Illinois and Iowa currently have programs, pilot programs, and we hope that other states will follow suit with programs as well in the Midwest. But ultimately, we would like to see a program at the federal level that provides us with a better use of conservation dollars in addition to the current risk management program. Hopefully that provides you with kind of a really quick idea of what's going on in Illinois and in agriculture today. So Elliot, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I know for our presenters, boiling down a huge part of our our economy into 5 minutes is not the easiest thing in the world, but I think Chris did a great job. Obviously, ag is such a big part of our state, and realizing that its impact on the environment and our food systems and stuff is very paramount for our organization and all these organizations. With that, we're going to switch from rural to urban, and I will be introducing Sean Ruan. Am I pronouncing that right? I always screw that up, I feel like.
Yeah, Ruan, close enough.
Ruan, yeah. He works for Advocates for Urban Agriculture, and he'll be sharing kind of the, what's going on in the cities and stuff, especially in cities like Chicago and Metro East and that kind of stuff. So, Sean, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, and I'm going to do my best to stay at 5 minutes here. It's definitely a challenge. I'll try to keep it really simple, but hey, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sean Ruane. I'm the Executive Director with Advocates for Urban Agriculture. And if you don't know about AUA, we're a coalition of urban farms, community and school gardens, and individual agricultural practitioners throughout the Chicagoland region. And our mission and our goal is really to expand sustainable agriculture in the region and continue to strengthen our local food system. In the midst of this pandemic, we've been really inspired by just the resilience that we've seen from our local farmers in Chicago, and just seen lots of new collaborations and just a huge surging demand for urban agriculture and local food. And the city, right, the majority of our work is focused on city policy. The mayor's office and the city have acknowledge and recognize that urban agriculture plays a key role in job creation. There's significant environmental benefits, just added green space, right? Greater access to local healthy food, all these things that are critical. And yet many of the baseline policies that are in place around urban agriculture really are significant barriers and keep a lot of folks who want to start their own farm or start their own garden from being able to do so. Just a few to highlight. The first one being water access. And, we have been working in coalition with a number of folks on this call, our food system partners, and with farmers and gardeners to try to create a more equitable water policy in the city. As the demand for local food increases, one of the things that many people don't realize is that the majority and almost all of the farms and gardens in the city of Chicago this year have not had access to water and have been entirely reliant on rainwater or rain catchment systems or other kind of unique ways that are not really sustainable for a commercial farm or any kind of larger operation that's trying to grow food at scale. The key issue revolves around the hydrant permit policy and just a lot of significant financial and administrative barriers that are related to that. So we have seen some positive development around that policy in the last few months, including the inclusion of urban farms being able to access water now through a hydrant, whereas before they had to access it through what was known as the festival fee, which cost them $83 a day per side of the hydrant in order to be able to access that water, which is just not sustainable. The average urban farm makes somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 in earned revenue every year through sales. And, based on that rate, urban farms would be spending more money on water than they would actually be making each year. So that's one of the key issues that we're doing a lot of work on right now. Land access is also another big piece of that in terms of zoning, right? Right now within the city, you have to be zoned in either a commercial or manufacturing or parks and open spaces zoning. We'd also like to see residential be included in that if and when the neighborhood and neighbors are supportive of the farm being there, and the food is ultimately going back to that community and supporting the local food system in that neighborhood and improving its resilience. So that's one of the other things. And then the final piece I'll highlight is just over the years, there's been a number of different attempts to try to ban livestock in the city. Those attempts, through incredible organized efforts, again, with a number of folks on this call, have always been kept at bay. But we know that those will probably continue to happen over time. And we want to make sure that livestock owners can continue to have livestock and can continue to practice animal agriculture in the city, because it just improves our food sovereignty and our food resilience and security in Chicago. So those are the three things I'll highlight, and I'll pass it back to Elliot.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Really appreciate that. And I think it's a really good highlight, that ag is not just like a state issue. It goes all the way down to the local city level, county level, all that fun stuff. And I think it's really, really good to highlight that. With that, I will turn it over to Molly Gleason, who works for the Illinois Stewardship Alliance and does a lot of work, or their organization does a lot of work with kind of like, how does food get to our table, right? And like, should we be focusing more on like local consumption of food and increasing access for folks across the state? So with that, without spoiling any more, Molly, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Elliot. So as Elliot said, I work for Illinois Stewardship Alliance, and we are a statewide nonprofit organization, and we bring farmers and eaters together to solve problems in the food system. So we do a lot of community organizing with farmers to help shape a farmer-led policy agenda, and then we help eaters essentially use their purchasing power and their political power to support local farms. So I'll start by telling you a really exciting win for this year legislatively. First off, this year we were able to pass, a coalition of organizations was able to finally get passed the Healthy Local Food Incentives Fund. And this fund, it creates essentially a statewide fund to allow farmers markets to match SNAP sales. So that means that a SNAP customer can go to a farmer's market, they can swipe their EBT card for $25, and then they would get matched an additional $25 to spend on fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's essentially doubling their purchasing power to afford fresh, wholesome food, but it's also, putting more of those federal SNAP dollars back into the pockets of our family farmers and reinvesting in Illinois communities. So we're really excited to finally see that in the budget and see that happen this year. Right now, where that's at is we're working with Illinois Department of Human Services to see if that will get rolled out this year. It would be really great if it did get rolled out this year, because of course, so many SNAP families could really use that during this pandemic. But that's still kind of up for debate and what will happen with that, and we'll see where that goes. The other thing that we were working on is cottage food law. So there are probably we estimate about 500 farms and local food businesses in Illinois that are operating under the cottage food law. And what that means for folks who might not be familiar is that they can make food in their home kitchen without and for sale to farmers market without having to spend $10,000 on a commercial kitchen. So it's really great for fostering small business development and supporting local farms. But the problem is that those folks are limited to only sales at farmers markets, with just very few exceptions. So you can imagine if you're trying to run a business and your only sales outlet is a farmer's market, it's going to be pretty limiting to the growth of your business. So this year we worked with IEC and a number of other organizations to draft legislation that would expand sales so that it would be all direct to consumer sales. So that cottage food businesses could sell at fairs and festivals, they could sell out of their home, they could sell online, and basically anything that was direct to consumer. That didn't get passed because the Capitol closed. So we were bummed to see that. And especially now it's even more important because farmers markets have been, they've been delayed. Many of them didn't open on time. Some of them shut down. Most of them are experiencing lower than average attendance and sales this year. So that's a real bummer for cottage food businesses who depend on those farmers markets. So we'll be working more this coming year to really push cottage food reform. And I just want to also say that just scale appropriate regulation and reform is something that we're also looking at in other pieces of the food system too, especially livestock industry and small scale meat processing. Those are really important to the growth of small scale farms and economic development in Illinois. And if you're wondering why that's important to the environment, we know that so much of the environmentally damaging practices that are happening, especially in agriculture, are kind of locked in place because of the corporate control on the food system. And we need to support more small farms and diversified small farms and give those farms more power in the food system, make sure that they're economically viable, because when we have those farms in charge of the food system, we're going to see better environmental practices overall. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Molly. That is a really, really great overview of kind of what's going on. With that, our next presenter is going to be Roger Cooley, who is the Executive Director of the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. He's been doing some really, really cool work that we've been working with him for the last couple of years on a really neat policy that we're still trying to get off the ground for the state, but they've been doing really cool stuff in Cook County and Chicago. So with that, Roger, I will hand it off to you.
Great, thank you. No, I need to share my screen, is that right?
Yeah, you should. I was gonna say you should be enabled to do it.
Cool. 1 second. There we go. All right.
We've just got
Is it there?
We've got a black screen right now.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you mind doing it?
We did see it for just a split second, but then it disappeared for some reason.
Do you mind doing it, Elliot?
Oh, yeah. Let me pull it up really quick.
You
No
go
worries.
to go to the second slide.
Yep.
Great. Thanks. So we focus on facilitating, developing, and implementing policies to adjust food justice and sovereignty in Chicago and across Illinois. Ours our main goal and mission. And you can go down. So talk really quickly about COVID-19 impacts in the food system right now, some of policy priorities, and the GF Good Food Purchasing Program, which Elliot highlighted. Keep going. Yeah. So as a lot of folks know, there's been massive disruption in the food system, especially that a lot of the, and Molly was referencing this, that a lot of the channels for food come in very specific pathways. So it's either if you're a farmer, you're selling in the institutions or wholesale, or you're selling to restaurants. You know, a lot of those, when they immediately got shut down, there became the larger food system wasn't able to absorb, readapt, readjust, and be resilient to make quick shifts, which what was happening. So you can shift again. And so paired with that, you know, it's created a tremendous demand for emergency food services with the massive unemployment that spiked, and especially folks who are in the retail and restaurant food environment are a lot of the folks in that emergency food demand. And that's outscaled, and is the same way that the larger food system is fairly inflexible and brittle. The emergency food system has also really struggled to catch up with that demand. And has struggled with also then being able to expand and reemploy folks on the ground. And so there's been a lot of conversations about how to, you know, make the bridges to create opportunities for local producers, farmers, restaurants to be able to be participants in the emergency food supply while getting healthy food, especially the communities had the hardest time getting it. You can move on, Elliot. And you know, in the case of emergency food, that's predominantly a race and equity issue. not just in terms of who's going to be most vulnerable for food insecurity, but also at the same time being most vulnerable to COVID. In a lot of cases, these are the folks who had to go back to work right away, who were, or considered essential services. So in the grocery stores, behind the scenes work at different food industries, but also communities who are most at risk because of existing inequities and kind of public health and medical conditions, which ties back into a lot of the food system issues that already exist. Go on. And obviously a lot of the employees in the food processing plants, and again, showing some of our people of color from communities of color. And this is really showing kind of, how, again, some of the brokenness of the food system, showing that the massive amount of cases that existed in meat processing plants, a lot of them being big bottlenecks because it's a very centralized and very hyper-centralized business model. There was the concern about pricing for meat, the availability for meat, but also again that these spaces are, very unsafe for the workers within them because of the scale and speed. And then even President Trump, making them essential businesses and also wiping away the liability for a lot of the companies to have to be treating their employees well, treating them well in these corporate processing facilities. And then, like for example, this week, there's actually an action against Tyson because of their horrible conditions in a lot of their plants right now. And again, showing that the consolidation, a lot of what Molly was talking about, that, some of the things that COVID and the current situation are really revealing is that the consolidation is causing these bottlenecks, is causing a lot of the issues that are not just an issue for the supply side farmers, but also for the other end of folks being able to access and get healthy food that's affordable and is able to maintain a healthy lifestyle while providing gainful and meaningful employment for folks. So some interesting opportunities, as Sean was mentioning, there's a big upsurge in interest and focus on more community-based self-sufficiency models of people producing their own food, having control over their food system at local levels, but that is still not recognized even after years of work with the city, that this is a really meaningful opportunity and a lot of barriers still exist there. And then as Molly was mentioning, all the barriers, even though there is a massive opportunity and a huge spike for local food, that there still are, the state interagencies are not seeing how all the pieces fit together, how collaboration among the agencies and departments could really smooth the process for helping to get more local food into our markets and into our institutions, while helping to pay better wages and get folks going. One of the things we did, and a lot of folks on the call helped signed on to this letter that we've sent to the Mayor Lightfoot, to really look at some of the pieces and really think about more a holistic approach to food system work. So more dollars for public food distribution, especially helping to support community-based organization, restaurants and businesses to be part of the emergency food work, connecting farmers markets to the LINK programs and expanded LINK programs, really making sure that food workers are getting PPE, that they're getting time off and sick pay if they need it, so they're not spreading it, but also for their families and themselves. Again, all the barriers that are being highlighted, and thinking about how to leverage public dollars for this transformation, and even setting up showing that it's a priority by putting somebody in the mayor's office who's focused on food systems policy. And we probably could say the same thing to the governor's office at the state level. And one of the big things we've been pursuing, and we're very close to getting a resolution in the spring, was the adoption of the Good Food Purchasing Policy or program at the state level. We've worked very closely with the city of Chicago and Cook County to adopt and begin the implementation of the program. So all the food that's purchased by the city, the county, their institutions, or in concessions on their property have to follow the 5 standards of local and sustainable animal welfare guidelines, fair worker and nutrition standards. So it starts setting parameters for those institutions to start having to purchase these products, but in a very patient way. So recognizing where they're starting from and building on that over time. Go on the next couple here. So we really see this policy as an opportunity to help support the diversification and decentralization of Illinois' food system, that this is a market that farmers could start transitioning potentially from commodities schools are going to keep feeding people. I mean, even if they're still semi-home based, they're going to keep purchasing meals every year. The current university system, they're going to keep serving meals, even, knowing that assuming this is a temporary interruption. Judicial facilities, the Veterans Affairs, they're all going to keep feeding folks. And that's a steady market, especially if it's backed up by policy. And then a lot of work with the IEC partners to really starting to think about the collaboration across the different agencies to be part of this, recognizing that there is a lot of collaborative opportunities. Like I just was getting off a call this morning with SNAP advocates who were talking about that there's SNAP Ed dollars, which come from a federal match pool that I think is the more you match, the more you get back. That could help do job training programs to help SNAP recipients to get into worker jobs that could be in processing facilities or other businesses who could then be selling back to the state. So a lot of really interesting combinations of opportunities down the road if we're being creative and leveraging all the different resources that are out there. And I think we'll stop there. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Roger. Really appreciate that. I'm excited I'm sure we'll probably have some questions about that. And see, will there be a link to Mr. Cooley's slides? We can probably connect people, but also just as an FYI, we are recording this and we're going to try to get this out to people one way or the other in the next couple of weeks, I believe. So if people want to review this again, we'll definitely be able to. With that, our next presenter, let me get my notes up here real quick, is Peter Lehner with Earthjustice, who is going to be speaking with us about some of what's going on in the state regarding sustainable agriculture, which is kind of where IEC started with all of this, with how is agriculture impacting our environment, and we've expanded out to start talking about things what Roger and Molly have been talking about. But sustainable ag is really kind of the root of where we began with this. So I'm excited to introduce Peter to everybody, and Peter, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. It's pouring outside here, so I think I'm in New York, and we got your rain from a couple of days ago, and I'm right under the roof, so I hope it's not too loud. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the larger context, since we work mostly on the federal level. Earthjustice is a national environmental law organization. We're very excited to have just opened up an office in Chicago. And although my team is largely based in New York, and I'll talk about some.
Peter, I think you just went on mute.
I pressed mute.
There we go.
Although based in New York, we just opened up a Chicago office, I was saying, and we're very excited to be working with many of you on a number of parallel issues. For example, enhancing the Good Food Purchasing Program in New York City, and trying to address it both long-term and because in response to COVID. We'll soon be filing a petition to protect the hundreds of community gardens in New York City to give them greater protection against development and otherwise, which again have been seen to be so important during COVID. But I'm going to quickly share screen to focus a little bit on, there we go, I hope. Do you see cows, corn, and crap? Am I sharing the screen? Okay.
Yep, you were good.
Okay, so this is as I said, to try to give this a bit of a national context, but also to think about the many levers we have to work. One of the things where we start is that when we think about industrial agriculture, a lot of people come at it from different angles. Sometimes it's very much the water quality perspective. There's real harm to water quality, often from agriculture, whether it be CAFOs or runoff from fields. We are often producing food that is not necessarily that healthy, or producing it in a way such as using antibiotics in animal feed that runs significant public health risks. And many of the issues that we think of as wildlife issues are actually because we're putting agriculture into wildlife territory. On the one hand, I'm sure everybody on this call knows all of this, but I think it's important to look at all of these as potential levers to push change, both on a legal level and a organizing lever. Some people are come at this because they're concerned about wildlife or water quality or air quality or the food. All of these come together in pushing us more towards sustainable agriculture. And now there's a particular interest and recognition of the importance of agriculture's impact on climate change. And a couple of years ago, agriculture, climate change, there were like two non-intersecting universes. And now more and more people are beginning to understand the impact of agriculture on climate change and vice versa. And so a year ago, in the Senate of the US, there was a hearing, its first ever, on climate change in agriculture. Just last week, the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis issued its big 500-page report, and that included some very, very good recommendations on how to address agriculture and how we can help move agriculture by reducing greenhouse gases, increasing soil carbon, which pulls greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. And again, I'm going through this quickly. Everyone, I'm sure, is familiar with it because, and then is aware that one of the complicating issues is, unlike burning fossil fuel, the agriculture greenhouse gases are mostly nitrous oxide and methane, which are much harder to measure. We use models and we use estimates, but it's not like we have a precise idea of exactly the number of gallons of oil burned and therefore the CO2. So there's some complications, but again, there's a real opportunity. And then the flip of that opportunity is that the agriculture community is seeing more and more the extent to which climate change, whether you call it climate change or extreme weather or anything else, is affecting their day-to-day reality. Separate from my Earthjustice hat, I actually run some farms through my family as well, and I can tell you that if you pay any attention, this is very real. Pests that were not a big problem 5 years ago are a bigger problem because of changing weather patterns. Obviously, floods and droughts, heat waves, all of this is becoming very real. And at times when the COVID pandemic showed us how vulnerable the food system is for a variety of different reasons, the added vulnerability of our food system to climate change should give us some concern. But again, this is a lever. This is now bringing producers into the effort to create more sustainable processes. And one of the exciting things here is that there is a lot of evidence all around the country, and certainly in the Midwest and Illinois, about practices that have been demonstrated at some different scales to make a big difference, both to reduce greenhouse gases, to increase soil carbon, reduce soil erosion, increase soil fertility, often either immediately or after several years, reduce the need for inputs and increase profitability. So all of these practices can help the producer and can help those who are downstream, downwind in our larger community. And some of them are listed on this slide. And again, I'm sure many people on this call are familiar with many of them, but it's a terrific opportunity we have that there's so many things that we can do to make a difference on our farms. The downside is that of these practices, on average, they're probably used on 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4% of US cropland. So we've got these great practices, they've been demonstrated, but they're not used very much. And that's where policy comes in. And we need to make some policy changes. Before I get to that, just one additional point is, this is the ultimate goal, just looking at from a climate perspective, using data that's out there. If you just add these practices on the applicable farmland, we can actually get to carbon neutral agriculture. And as I said before, we're also getting better water quality, better community air, better farmer profitability and resilience. So how do we get there? We have a lot of opportunities. The Farm Bill passed in 2018 has a number of programs that can be tweaked. The environmental community and others are urging what may be a new administration to use a number of the Farm Bill programs to prioritize water quality and climate change more than they have in the past. In the House, the Shelley Pingree, who herself is a farmer, she's a representative from Maine, has introduced the Agriculture Resilience Act, which has a lot of provisions that would set goals for sustainable agriculture and essentially tweak the programs to help us get there. And again, a great opportunity we have is that this is not a place where we have to find a new pot of money. We already have a lot of money going through the farm safety net, through the farm conservation programs, through the commodity programs. We just need to redirect them a little bit in ways that will actually benefit sustainable farming. There's also opportunities in energy laws and environmental laws. I won't go through those now, but these are all opportunities for a group to work on that can make a big difference. And very exciting, in parallel to what's going on at the federal level, there's a lot of activity at a number of states to try to create state laws of various different sorts, varying degrees of ambition, that will also try to create incentives for sustainable agricultural practices, or sometimes remove barriers. Talking about urban agriculture, one of the challenges, barriers. How do we get rid of those barriers to enhance the opportunities for those who are already wanting to move in this direction? So we at Earthjustice are, I'm pretty sure that's the end, yeah, are looking forward to working with you. And I think what's exciting, as I said, is this work at the Chicago level and at the Illinois level and at the federal level are finally all beginning to get some momentum and can start feeding on each other in a way that offers some real opportunities for us. Thanks. Back to you, Elliot.
Cool. Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate that. It's really cool to see all these. Oh, yeah, you're there we go. You're good to go. All right, cool. Well, hey, Peter, thank you. It's really cool to see all this, what's going on nationally and stuff, and seeing where the states are going with things like soil health policy and all of that. So very cool. Now, very briefly, because I want to get to everybody else who's been listening to hear what you guys want to know about. I'm going to briefly go through some of the work we've done with confined animal feeding operations in Illinois. So what other folks refer to as factory farms, or we call CAFOs most of the time. So I'm going to do that really quick. We had a few bills this last year that dealt with CAFOs. We've been really concerned about the lack, especially of local control of the siting and construction of these facilities. Right now in the law, it is set up in a way that the communities have a voice in the sense that they can hold a public meeting to say whether or not they would like one built, but ultimately their decision of a yes or a no is non-binding, and the ultimate decision in that is left up to the Department of Agriculture, which 99% of the time will go to the affirmative and allow those facilities to be built. We've been really looking at the laws to try to figure out how do we enable local communities to have a better definitive say in the construction of these facilities. So we've had a few different bills. One is allowing municipalities to enforce their zoning up to 1.5 miles out to say you cannot have a CAFO within this close to a municipality. We are also really interested in waste management plans being required for all CAFOs in the state, not just large CAFOs over a certain head of animal, because discharges and that kind of thing still happen. And a lot of the times we feel that it's because there's not proper waste management plans in place to keep, all of the waste that's being produced in these facilities in one spot in a safe manner. And we continue to see examples. I know I've seen a couple of people on this call that we've been to their properties and seen firsthand what happens when waste and hazardous material is not dealt with properly. And we want to change the laws to make that go away. Another thing we've looked at also are phosphorus and basically manure application rates on farms. There have been really, really big issues with the overspreading of manure from these facilities. And it has become a cheap way for folks to get rid of their waste that's produced at these facilities. And it's not, the only benefit is that they get rid of it. It's not benefiting fields really. I mean, a lot of the stuff that is spread on is ultimately washed off and is not really doing the ground any good in terms of their crop production or anything. We continue to see this over and over again. So we want to work closely with the Department of Ag on that. And I'm actually being messaged by Crystal Clare right now, who's one of the farms we've been to. And the setback requirements within the Livestock Management Facilities Act, which regulates these, is woefully inadequate in protecting property rights for neighbors of these properties. And the setback lines need to be increased. They're already not enforced very well as it is. So there's a really big enforcement problem with the Department of Ag and the Environmental Protection Agency in regards to these facilities. So that's something we're going to continue to work on into next year, in the coming years, until something gets done. With that, I'm going to switch off CAFOs for a second and just talk very briefly about what kind of wins and bills that our organization, along with our affiliates, have had in the last few years that we were hoping are going to help with sustainable ag and our food systems in the state. One that I worked on a bunch last year was House Bill 4704, which was the Right to Garden bill, which came out of a property in Northern Illinois where there was a woman in Elmhurst that wanted to have a garden with a hoop house on it. The city said no, and the more we've delved into it, it's a very unfair application of the law in terms of their zoning and code enforcement. But we wanted to pass a bill that says if you want to have a hoop house in your backyard and you want to garden, that is your right. Municipality cannot say otherwise. So we're excited to do that more next year. We've also been looking at a resolution that would basically be asking Congress to make farming a public service under student loan forgiveness, because we want to increase the amount of new and emerging farmers, because we know that there is a peak that we're hitting right now with farms that are going to start turning over as folks retire. So we want to encourage folks to get into that. And as Roger mentioned, the Good Food Purchasing Policy Task Force is something that we're actively working on. We're speaking with the Lieutenant Governor's office actually about this right now. So we're excited to get some more momentum on that. Also, we've done some stuff with trying to protect pollinators to restrict spraying so it doesn't, or pesticide spraying so it doesn't impact, especially like apiary operations and that kind of thing. And then compost sales too. Composting is very heavily regulated in Illinois, and it should be in some ways because depending on how you do it, it can be bad. But it's also punishing people that are really good actors in this, and we want to ensure that small scale folks are definitely able to produce compost for sale if they would like, if they do it in the right way. With that, that is a super duper brief overview of a lot of stuff that we've been working on, and I'm probably missing some stuff. But this is the point where we would really like to get feedback from you all that have been listening to this about things that you would like to see done. You know, what are we missing? Like, let us know kind of what's going on. Right now, what I'm going to do is allow participants to unmute themselves on here. But here's the caveat. I would like, if you would like to say something right now, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box and just say, hey, put me on the list or whatever, we're going to keep a kind of a running list going of folks that would like to, you know, comment on this. And as a side note, if you don't feel comfortable speaking over the Zoom or you're zoomed out or anything, I totally get it. Feel free. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me after this, and I will definitely get back with you and put it in here. So with that, I encourage folks to start writing in the chat things that they're thinking about. I will kick it off with one thing. Andrew Swak from Open Lands had sent me a message earlier today to kind of cue things up on this. And he said a wide range of farmers talk about access to land as their biggest barrier to profitability growing food. They include urban growers, suburban growers, and farmers trying to grow sustainably in rural parts of Illinois. Recent state policy proposals to improve access to land have been blocked, watered down, or unsupported. What are stakeholders in the community going to do to address this pressing need? I think that's a really, really great point, and I know that there's some folks on here that have been asking about this more and more. And maybe if one of our presenters wants to chime in on this, they're welcome to. But I know one of the things we've been looking at, the Department of Natural Resources is revamping its public ag lease program. They've got about 38,000 acres that they lease out for farms operations. And it's one of the ideas that's been floated out to them is that there could be a possibility of doing really low rent contracts with beginning and underserved communities and farmers and stuff. And that could be a really, really good opportunity to get new folks on the land. But that's just obviously a small portion of this. And we definitely want to keep kind of keep working on that front. Does anybody of our presenters have any thoughts or anything on that? I want to make sure that I'm not missing something.
Well, and Gary wanted to be added to speak.
Oh, okay, yeah. Gary, I think you can unmute yourself if you'd like to say something. Oh, where you at? Hey, Gary, can you?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I got you unmuted. Yeah, if you put you on the list, I can always unmute you too, just
okay.
FYI.
Great. It wasn't really addressing that question, but you know what I appreciate about how you organize the presentations is that they really touch on big buckets within the comprehensive arena of trying to build a healthy, sustainable food shed in Illinois. And so whether it's looking, you know, at the issue of, you know, small and mid-sized farm food production, urban agriculture, healthy soils, and sustainable ag practices, there were, you know, different strategies that were posited under each of those areas, and there's probably other areas too. But to me, it begs the question of similarly to what's being done in the waste arena right now, with hopefully the development of a comprehensive waste diversion plan across the state. That there needs to be more of a comprehensive approach to building a healthy, sustainable Illinois food shed. And so having some sort of, and you know, to Roger's point about having a director of, you know, sustainable ag or you know, in Illinois, I think that would play to that. But I think that this comprehensive approach and a vision with specific goal targets, I think, is something that I would like to advocate for. There needs to be more coordination. I think everybody's efforts in this arena over the last decades have been great, and I also feel like so much of this is piecemeal, right? And there does need to be more coordination, and I think having some sort of a state policy that would develop that coordination would be extremely helpful. The other comment I wanted to make, and this is a really specific piece related to just increasing food production by small and mid-sized farmers, is that one of the interesting things that the state of Ohio did in the area of composting is that they did an asset and gap analysis of their infrastructure. You know, looking at where the compost sites facilities were across the state and where they weren't. And then they actually put some funding toward developing that infrastructure and filling the gaps. All the, you know, some of the comments that Roger made about the food system breaking down, you know, during COVID, I think begs the question of how do we actually create the local food infrastructure in Illinois, fill the gaps, understand where the assets are, and then put some funding and policy behind that analysis. So those are some of my thoughts.
Those are really, really great points, Gary. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I think as you said at the beginning, I think we've come to a moment, I mean, I think me personally too, just in my professional life, of realizing that we, like you said, there's all these piecemeal kind of things that we all do that are all great, like in their own right, but they all have this intersectional quality to them that I think we're really coming to a moment now where we need to start thinking about this holistically, as Roger was saying. And I'm really excited that we have such a diverse group of people that are interested in this, from both an environmental standpoint and equitability and workers' rights and animal welfare and all of these things kind of coming together. And I think it's going to be paramount for us moving forward. And this is why we're doing these town halls. We want to hear from everybody, to hear different ideas. I love the idea from Ohio, and we're taking notes on all of this right now. We've got one of our interns, Micaiah, who's doing a great job on this. Thank you, Micaiah. Shout out to you, to really help us kind of understand all this moving forward. So thank you for that. I put my email in the chat, just FYI. So if folks want to email me afterwards, if they think of something, please feel free to. I know Jim on here, Jim McGrath had asked about the Elmhurst situation. So yeah, she had a hoop house in her backyard. The city claimed that that was not covered by the permits that they issue, even though there are multiple other people in her community that have these in her backyard. There may actually be a racial component to this too. She is one of the few Black residents in Elmhurst. It's a very strange situation, and we're actively monitoring it. But it highlights that, the food access and the ability to grow your own food is not equitable in this state. There's a lot of communities that are still not on board with this, and it's not even, it's a lot of it is this, like, people have problems with aesthetics, in their towns and stuff, and they don't want to, quote unquote, see something that they don't think should be there. And we think that that's blatantly wrong, to be frank. I do see Kay has raised her hand. I love people using the raise your hand function. That's great. I actually forgot to mention that. So if anybody wants to do that, feel free to. But Kay, I will unmute you right now and let you talk for a second.
Well, thank you. We live next to, struggled with the overspray at first, and now with dicamba and some other things that are going on. Are you interested in that kind of problem?
Yes, pesticide and herbicide drift is something that we've been really, really interested in, and dicamba especially has caught the attention, not only of us, but everybody in the agriculture community right now. As folks may have seen, there was a federal ruling recently that basically stripped the classification of dicamba as like registration under US EPA herbicides and pesticides. That being said, there is a concerted effort among the ag industry and the chemical companies to try to get that registration reinstated for next year. The Department of Ag in Illinois basically said people that already have dicamba can continue to use it, but retailers are not going to be able to really sell it unless they've already got stock, in which case they can sell that, but they can't buy more and then sell it again. Dicamba has been a huge issue affecting natural properties along with other neighboring crops too. And it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out over the next couple of years, because there's a really good chance that there's going to be some pretty high profile class action lawsuits associated with the spraying of that chemical. But then even beyond dicamba, we continue to see declining pollinator populations throughout the country, and it's most likely linked to overuse of pesticides. People like to think that they can follow the guidelines on spraying, and simply, if they follow the label, that everything's good. But just like dicamba, you can follow the label to the T, and it will still pick up and drift long after it's been sprayed. And this is something that we are continually looking at, and we work really closely with groups like Prairie Rivers Network to try to address where we're going with the regulations on pesticides and herbicides. So Kay, thank you for that. It's definitely—
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Keep up those efforts.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if, like I said, if any folks have any interest in helping with that or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd really appreciate it.
Hey, sir, I missed the first half of what you were saying. You cut out just a little bit, but did you say that you had experienced, like your farm had experienced pesticide drift damage? Or is it just an issue you were concerned about?
I'm trying to unmute. There we go.
Yeah. Yes. No, we've had damage. We've had damage. Our woods, our oak hickory forest, you know, there are certain oak trees that are more susceptible than others, and then the red buds are just really, and now the dogwoods, but really it's our vegetable garden. I mean, we lost almost blueberries. That's the kind of thing that we've experienced, and it was happening even before the dicamba came along, but now it's even worse.
Bummer.
Yeah, I mean, to say that's a shame. I know people are seeing it on their, you know, even in their gardens and stuff too, just growing flowers in their backyard. You know, it's a huge bummer.
Well, and what you said, Elliot, about the pollinators is so true. I mean, you know, even last year we had a pretty good contingent. To see one or two, and the bees are seemingly okay this year, but not as good as they have been in the past. So this is really getting down to, are we going to be able to grow anything?
Yeah, no, and it's because very highlight. I mean,
pollinators.
Yeah, because I mean, without pollinators, we have no food system. You know, I mean, that's the basis of everything. So I definitely appreciate that. I know Kim asked me to unmute her. Kim, can you hear me right now?
Yeah. Hey everybody. This is Kim with Prairie Rivers Network. We've been working, as Elliot said, with IEC and other groups pretty closely on this issue of herbicide drift, as well as the pollinator issue. And we're in the process of getting some comments together and a potential sign-on or some draft talking points that people can use to also submit to US EPA for the upcoming potential re-renewal of dicamba for 2021. But, you know, as is mentioned previously on this call, it's not just dicamba. There's a lot of herbicides that are really threatening the growth of specialty growers and specialty crops and private gardens, so as well as wildlife habitat. It's pretty widespread across the US. It's not just Illinois. So there is a lot of attention being brought to this issue, but I can't say it enough, is one of the most important tools is reporting your injuries to IDOA, because that's their main method for documenting injuries. And that's really, really, really important. And if you need a monitoring, or if you need any tips on how to do that, you can just email me. I'll put my email in the chat and I can help people out with that. But report, please.
Doesn't do a damn thing.
Well, I know, but it does make it makes it a public record, and that is a powerful tool for people who are working on this issue. The fact that it is a public record.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, thank you for that, Kim. Really appreciate it. We're going to move on to our next question I see on here. I believe it said, how are efforts changing to increase adoption of sustainable farming under nutrient loss reduction strategy? And how are advocates engaging landowners and farmers who are resistant to changing their practices? The Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy is great in theory, but we continue to see when they put out their biannual reports that there is a lot of work to be done. In fact, there have actually been increases in some pollution in parts of the state. So there's obviously something that is not working correctly in terms of the recommendations that are coming out of those groups. That being said, some of our affiliates on here are actively working with farmers to talk about sustainable practices. I know Illinois Stewardship Alliance has been doing a lot of on-the-ground work with farmers to, you know, really reach out to them and, you know, show them the benefits of this. Molly, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, sure. So what Illinois Stewardship Alliance has been doing is building a network of commodity farmers who also care about soil health and conservation. And the idea behind that network is to build leadership among those farmers so they can really be spokespeople and champions for soil health, and encourage their peers to adopt those practices, to put forward, you know, farmer-led policy solutions on those practices. And really champion that issue. So that's kind of what we're doing on the ground with, you know, trying to create a farmer-led type of, I guess, solution to get more farmers on board with adopting soil health. The other thing that we just started doing this year is we launched a program in like faith-based organizations to help farmers talk to other faith-based churches and farms in those communities to tie the connection between soil health and land stewardship a little bit closer together and encourage more of those practices. So those are kind of the two things we've been working on.
That's great. And I think that really highlights, we talk about all of these policy things and conservation practices and all this stuff, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot if we can't communicate it with the folks on the ground that are the ones that need to be implementing this, or we would like to be implementing this. And it's great that we've got affiliates that are trying to figure out what's the easiest way or the best way to, communicate that in a way that, is digestible for folks, which is half the battle, I think, with a lot of all of these different issue areas that we cover. So that's
yeah,
great.
and it's super. It's super cultural too.
Oh,
trying to change the culture of farming is,
exactly. I mean, farming. A lot of these farms have been in their families for decades, even 100, 150, 200. Some of them are. I think there's a couple of 200-year farms in Illinois. And when you try to address a culture on a farm that's been in a family for a long time, it's not the easiest thing to do. But it's definitely kind of an interesting talk, and we're always kind of working towards that. Molly, thank you. Next question I see is from Ben. I wanted to ask, from a policy perspective, what can we do as a state to promote alley cropping, tree intercropping? Do you think there needs to be an educational campaign on the benefits? I definitely have been hearing from more and more people about things like agroforestry and the integration of trees on landscapes to help prevent wind erosion and all that kind of stuff. We have not explored that from a policy perspective yet, but I would be interested if anybody's got resources or anything. That's something that we would definitely be interested in looking into. Anything that can encourage folks to, implement these policy or these practices that help with preventing soil erosion, nutrient loss, that kind of stuff. Peter, did you have a comment you want to make on that?
Yeah, one of the exciting parts in the House Select Committee report was the establishment of regional agroforestry centers, which is something we had urged. And also in Shelley Pingree's Agriculture Resilience Act is a recognition of the importance of agroforestry. So there is, again, growing recognition of the tremendous benefits for climate, water, and much else that incorporating trees into landscapes, both cropland and grazing land, provide. So we'd love to try to work with you to build some support for that. And there's, I think, some interest in trying to, for example, take state non-point source pollution control programs and encourage agroforestry and silvopasture as part of the response to that, not just building a dam somewhere. No,
that's a really great point. And that reminds me too, kind of going back a little bit to what Molly was saying with the whole cultural thing. I remember talking with somebody at a conference or I guess it was last year at this point, that they were talking with a farmer about why they should be planting trees on their property. And then they talked about how their great-great-grandfather had busted his back ripping trees out of the ground and removing rocks and stuff because he wanted to have as much farmland as possible. But then when you approach them and say you should be planting trees, it's like counterintuitive to the way that they were brought up, and that's an interesting part of the conversation. And no, I appreciate that, Peter. And the question from Ben, definitely something we would like to look into. I see Crystal has got her hand raised. I'll unmute you really quick. Okay, Crystal, can you hear me?
I can, thank you, Elliot. I'll try to be brief. We've spoken before about legislation that is needed. For about 2 years now, we've been battling this CAFO. Talked to you about it many times. We've talked to IDOA, IEPA, we've talked to our senators, to our legislators. If there could be a point in time that several of us throughout the state could get together with you and tell you exactly what this is like living next to one of these. Basically what the EPA has now told us is if we want anything done about it, we're going to have to sue rather than trying to help us. They're suggesting a lawsuit now. Other thing that I'd like to say is about the composting. We would love to be able to host a composting workshop on our site. Not saying that we're professional at it, but people need to be able to see what compost does. And we think this probably could help the phosphorus issue if the state would promote composting. So whenever people can do this, or if we can get a video crew out here, we are looking into offering what we do on our compost site. The other thing that our group has talked about is that we have got to start educating non-farmer people. When we talk about what CAFOs are, the general population doesn't know how hogs are raised in a CAFO, and we've got to get this word out there. And then the last thing is, a couple of them had talked about not enough land available to grow. And we have just the opposite problem. We have land. We're certified organic. We have the certification. We have land. We just can't find people to come help us. You know, if we could find a couple that would want to come and use our land, use our certificate, grow produce. The problems are we don't have another house. So these are issues that I think there are people out there willing to, you know, to give up 2, 3, 10 acres to get some good quality food grown. But so anyway, enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Crystal, and especially that last point. I think that there is an opportunity for us to start connecting folks that don't have land to those who do and are willing to maybe rent out some of it for folks, and the state can play a role in that. There's a huge educational component to sustainable ag and our food system and everything that our state has not been good at really addressing, whether it's education of farmers or education of the public that can either are food consumers. So I really appreciate that, Crystal. We've got all your notes in here and definitely am interested in that. One of the questions, what is allowed for mosquito spraying in Illinois? That is a weird one because I know that one of the things that Illinois has set up are mosquito abatement districts, which are one of those weird governmental entities that maybe don't need to exist. They become taxing bodies, and I can't tell you exactly what the definite regulations are, but that's something we'll keep in the notes and maybe we can do some follow-up on. So I appreciate that. Let's see. We're 113 right now. I think we can keep going for a little bit. Food. Oh, okay, cool. Just a note from Deborah on there about food security initiative, Suburban Community College. I encourage folks to read that. We're going to keep going just to save time a little bit. Yeah, and it's Lauren's saying it's a great time to support cottage food industry because of COVID. We totally agree. We are primed right now for some serious change in cottage food law and food accessibility right now because of what is going on. And I think any legislator that doesn't recognize that is pretty silly at this point, if I'm being honest. So hopefully this next year, we're really going to be able to make some good headway on that. Lenore Beyer, our good friend Lenore, just asked, is anyone working on Black and Indigenous farmer land loss? I know that AUA has done a little bit with trying to connect with those folks, but that is something that we're, I think is becoming an emerging topic. And even with, the COVID pandemic, also with everything that's been happening with George Floyd and the protests nationwide has really highlighted, the systemic, racial inequity in this country. And that includes farming as well. And it's not something that I think is very immediately, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not apparent to everybody. Like that is such a huge problem. And I think, Lenore, I think that's something that we're really, really interested in. I'm not sure how we do that with state policy, but I would love to have a conversation with folks about how we can do that. We have had talks with the Department of Ag about having a position set up there that was specifically about, racial equity in farming in general in the state, but it's something we definitely want to keep talking about. And now more than ever, I think it's a conversation that needs to happen publicly and kind of frankly at this point. I know Kim put some more stuff about pesticide herbicide industry. That's great. And then Crystal, if you see in the chat, Gary is offered to talk with you about some stuff, and that's great. I don't see any other hands raised. And unless anybody has any other questions, I mean, this has been fantastic to hear from you all. And we've maintained over, 35, 40 people through this whole thing. And it's definitely awesome to see so much interest in this. With that said, if any of our presenters have any last words they would like to say or not, totally up to you. If you guys want to make any points, I'll open that up. But yeah, I think we're in a pretty good spot. So again, thank you all so much for helping us with this. This is really going to help us moving forward into next year and honestly the coming years. Doing this virtually is definitely kind of a goofy situation we're in, but overall I think we're making the best of a kind of a weird time, and seeing so many people interested. We've done a few of these food-based webinars and stuff throughout the summer, and the amount of response that we get from each one of these really blows me away, honestly, because I know folks get zoomed out, and it's, I do too. And the fact that folks are sitting here at 1 o'clock on their Friday and hanging out with us for a little while and kind of talking shop is awesome. So again, from all the IEC folks, thank you all. Thank you to our presenters. And we will be sharing this recording. And our communications guy, Tucker, posted in the chat. We've got a bunch of other town halls we're going to be doing on different things like clean energy and a lot of the other stuff we're doing with our organization as well. And yeah, very cool stuff. Well, thank you all so much. And we will be in touch soon and get this recording shared with you all. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.